Welcome to In the Telling. I'm Stephen G. Forwood.
And I'm Miranda Mims, and we are the co-founders of the Nomadic Archivist Project.
I would like to welcome our guest today, Dr. Stanton Biddle, a retired librarian whose career spanned nearly 50 years. He held positions at the Library of Congress, the New York Public Library, Howard University, SUNY at Buffalo, and finally Baruch College at the City University of New York. His time at New York Public included 7 years at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, where he served as reference librarian, archivist, and research project director. Dr. Biddle was born and raised in the rural and predominantly white area of Western New York State. He has cultivated a lifelong interest in African American history and culture. His focus in retirement has been on genealogy, primarily involving his own African American family that has been based in Western New York for over 200 years. Today, he will talk about applying his library research skills to his quest to document his family's unique history. We are so very excited to have you with us on In the Telling. Welcome, Stanton. And I love that we have so many intersections, Stanton. Growing up, I grew up in Western New York as well. I, of course, an alum of Howard University and worked for some time as an archivist at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture. And I know that I think Stephen as well has an interesting relationship too with your history.
Well, what's great about Stanton Biddle is that I remember just admiring him when I was a children's librarian in Toledo, Ohio. And at the second annual Black Caucus of the American Library Association conference in Milwaukee, this was my first conference, it was my first plane ride, and my father was visiting my grandmother, who also lived in Milwaukee, and who brought in my grandmother, my father, and my niece, and my cousin to my talk. While I was giving the talk, it was Stanton Biddle. So, among many stories, that's one of my favorite stories about Stanton. I was very happy that you decided to come onto the show today because of the conversations we were having about your family history. I want to begin by asking you to talk a little bit about growing up, where you grew up and how you grew up, and just to kind of set the stage for today's talk.
Okay, before that, Miranda, what part of New York are you from?
Rochester, New York.
Oh, I went to high school in Rochester, as I told you.
Which high school did you go to?
West, it's not there anymore.
Oh, West, okay.
It's Wilson Academy now, on Genesee Street. Stephen, the reason I knew who you were and where your session was, I was one of the planners for the conference, and I knew all of the programs and all of the presenters and all of so when someone came walking up to me saying Forwood, planning the program, where you were and what time.
Wow. Well, just thank you for bringing my grandmother, and that was one of my favorite parts of my talk, is seeing my grandmother walk through that door, so thank you.
Yeah. Okay. As Miranda said, I was born and raised in rural, preponderantly white Western New York. I was born in Allegheny County, that's on the Pennsylvania border, south of Rochester. All of the colored people in all of the towns for miles around were related to me. Well, as a small child, I realized my family was different from all the other ones. We looked different. You could spot us from one town to the other. And I always thought this was a curious anomaly, but I didn't think anything more of it. Until at some point in school, we were talking about history and family's history. And so the question came up of all the kids, where's your family from? And we heard some are from France, some are from Spain, some are from England, Germany, Scotland. And they got to me, where are you from? And I said, here. They said, no, we mean your ancestors. I said, here. They said, no, what country, what other country? What they didn't know is that when I was born in 1943, my great-great-grandmother was still alive. She was born in 1843 in the town of Prattsburg, which is 50 miles from where I was in school. Her parents were also born in Prattsburg in Steuben County around in the 1820s, because she was born in 1840s. So we had to go back a generation before that, which would have been around 1790 We went across the border into Pennsylvania. So when I said my family had been in Western New York forever, it was almost quite literally true. The other anomaly was the fact that, as I said, all of the colored people in all of the towns in all directions were my family. As a child, I was trying to figure out how they were related. My mother and father each have one brother and one sister.
Okay.
So that gave me 8 first cousins, 6 on my father's side and 2 on my mother's side. My mother's mother had 5 sisters and 1 brother. So my mother had 34 first cousins, almost all living in the same region. My mother's mother had 13 brothers. She was born in Scioto, New York, which is also in Allegheny County. Most of these descendants still lived in Western New York. I had, as I said, the 8 first cousins. My mother had 34 first cousins, so her children were my second cousins. And my great-grandmother on that side had the 13 children, so all of their descendants were my third cousins.
What are some of the surnames?
Huff, Biddle, Peterson, Gayton. There's a lot of twisting around, so they come up over and over on different lines. But Peterson is the main line, and Bliss is probably the second most prolific. So as I said, growing up, I had all of these relatives all over the place, and it was sort of a challenge to figure out how we related to them. That was my early school when I was in grade school. In 1957, we moved from Friendship, where I lived, to Rochester, New York. So I went to high school in Rochester. A lot of the descendants of my grandmother and great-grandmother's families also moved to Rochester. So in Rochester, I was meeting some of these new families and reconnecting with the other ones who had moved up earlier. I'd like to skip for the next part. I graduated from high school in 1961, went to college at Howard University. I went to graduate school at Atlanta University. I got a master's in library science. I got a job at the Schomburg. And around 1970, I went to a lecture that Alex Haley gave at New York University, talking about finding his family's roots. I said, hey, I can do that. So that inspired me to launch the quest. It was the search going all the way back to grade school to find my identity. Family, where they're from. There were several questions we wanted to answer. Where did the family come from? When did they come to New York? And why?
Yeah.
So where am I now? At Schomburg and Alex Haley. I went off to graduate school to work on my doctorate. So the next part of the story comes back in 1979. I got my doctorate from the University of California, Berkeley. My first job after that was at the State University of New York at Buffalo. So going from Rochester to Washington to New York, came back to Buffalo. And I said, hey, I'm back in New York. Let me resume my interest in my family's history. Luckily, I had relatives in Buffalo and Rochester who were also interested.
Oh, wow.
My mother's sister and I sat down and wrote all the information that we could put together on the family. We made a chart where she listed her grandmother, that was Florence Peterson, her 13 brothers and sisters. And then we listed the descendants of each one, so the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. So we had documented a lot of those people that I mentioned earlier. Luckily, I had other people in the family who were interested in family history. One of my grandmother's sisters, Aunt Zeta, she lives in Wellsville. She was interested in the family, and she clipped newspapers. Anytime anything came up in the local newspapers about anybody in the family.
Wow.
So she had this scrapbook of clippings from Southern tier newspapers that our family had done. She died around 1950, but her daughter inherited the scrapbook. In 1973, one of my cousins who, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but he was put up for adoption, came to New York, grew up in New York, moved to California, and as an adult, came back to Western New York to find his roots. Gave him the scrapbook, he took it back to Los Angeles, and he transcribed all of those clippings.
Oh,
and
wow.
when I was doing family history research, he gave them all to me.
So you're very, very fortunate.
Well,
you're extremely fortunate to find something that you love and that you're interested in, and to find the material evidence of your family's history as well.
Yeah.
And so,
remember back in the beginning, I said when the kids asked where I was from, I could say where my grandparents are. When my great-great-grandmother died at 100 in 1943,
Mm-hmm.
there were write-ups in the newspapers because she was the
Yes.
oldest woman in the county. So
Mhm.
her history saying that she was born in 1843 in Prattsburg. Her parents were from Prattsburg and their ages. By getting the locations and the names, I was able to start a real research project because I had names, dates, and places.
But
Uh,
weren't you also in that newspaper article? Because you were born. This is
yeah,
your first time you appeared in print.
yeah, the article on her 99th birthday was it? No, it was
95th, I think.
they had she died in December.
Mm-hmm.
He had a 100th birthday a couple weeks earlier in December.
Mm-hmm.
When they described the party, they said that her children were there. They gave her daughter's name, grandchildren gave their names, and 2 great-grandchildren. And they cited my cousin Judy and me, Stanton Biddle. Like 2 months old, my name was in the local newspaper.
You were born into it. Born into the
Yeah, and I didn't see that article for many years. When I was doing the research later on, I saw the clipping
Oh,
because
wow.
my aunt did, and I saw where there I am.
So Stanton, you said that you started getting definitely more deeper into it once you got back to Buffalo. Buffalo, I know, has a very strong Black genealogical society. Were you a part of that society?
It's the Afro-American Historical Society of the Niagara Frontier.
Mhm.
Mm.
On the board.
I think you probably had a relationship with. They're
Mhm.
very strong. They're very active.
Okay, one of my cousins who's been working very closely with me over the years is Madeline Easley Scott.
Mhm.
And she's the editor of the journal. Sometimes she's the president, the vice president, the secretary. So she's been very active and has kept me involved all these years since I left Buffalo. But going back to Buffalo and my aunt, I went to Buffalo in 79, I think it was. I had come there from having spent 4 years in Oakland, California, 8 years in New York, going to school in Atlanta, and the time in Washington, D.C. So I had developed a certain expectation of life. Buffalo was boring, deadly boring. And so I said, I have to figure out something to keep myself alert. I was supposed to be working on my dissertation, but that wasn't attractive enough. So I said I had all these cousins in town. And so my aunt and I, as I said, did the paper trail. But then when I had like 1,000 names, so we decided I have to figure out some way of controlling all of this.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Off the data sheet on which I put the name, birth date, place of birth, the parents, and the names of the children for everybody and how they were related to each other. I took all of those clippings that my cousin had transcribed and transferred that information onto these sheets. By the time I got to about 1,000 sheets, I realized this is also getting out of control.
Wow.
That's when I moved from Buffalo to New York, and I dropped the project for a while because I had gotten the job at Baruch College, the University of New York.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So for several years there, I didn't do much with genealogy. But then in 1988, I revived the interest. I went back to all of those data sheets.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a Family Tree Maker computer software package. And during November and December 1988, I think it was, I spent all day, every day, inputting all of that data from all of those sheets into Family Tree Maker, which made it a whole lot easier because you could just find anybody you wanted. You could see connections.
Mm-hmm.
It was really a great step forward. Oh, what I didn't tell you is when I was in Buffalo, as I said, I was very, very, very bored. And so every Saturday, I went either to the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library
Mm-hmm.
or to the Amherst Family History Center, got out the microfilm reels, transcribed from microfilm all of the federal and state censuses that identified Black families in Allegheny, Cattaraugus, and Steuben County. Since I knew they were all related, it's just a matter of figuring it out. I only did the Black families or the families that had Blacks in them. That's how that also was put into the database that I put together in 1980. Even today, it's a fantastic resource because I can go to a town and see all of the Blacks who lived in that town in a particular year. census by census, the kids that were born, the people who died, when they moved from this town to the other town, what their jobs were, what the value of the property was, that sort of thing.
So Stan, you were saying in the beginning, you were just compiling these lists and going using microfilm and then creating just tons and tons and tons of data sheets. And then Family Tree Maker came along and you started inputting the data into that. So that was still in the late 80s, correct? So it's...
I bought Family Tree Maker in 88.
88, yeah. And Family Tree Maker still is still here and people still use
right.
it. Has your research or the way that you document the work that you're doing, any genealogical work that you're doing, has that changed in the last 20 or so years?
Oh, yeah. Because remember, Family Tree Maker was a freestanding software package. About 10 years later, Ancestry started. So I moved a lot of the stuff from Family Tree Maker over to Ancestry. And then with Ancestry, you can go online and link what you have to the whole universe of the internet that they keep adding to.
In addition to Family Tree and Ancestry.com, were there any other resources you used, recent tools that you've used that you would recommend? Because before you were just going and checking out the microfilm and looking at census records. Now in your sojourn, because you've kind of gone through a lot of different phases of your genealogical research.
Yeah.
So,
well, Family Search is the one I recommend because it's free.
Okay, yes.
Familiarizes you with how the database is set up, how you search, how you start your tree. And then you can go over to Ancestry because that links you to DNA results. Also in 88, I was, as I said, working with the Schomburg. Schomburg Corporation is a friends group for the Schomburg Library.
Mm-hmm.
We set up a genealogy committee to help other people do their family history research at the Schomburg. We got into a fight in the corporation and it was a spinoff. A bunch of us okay. started a separate organization, which we affiliated with the National Organization of Black Genealogists, which is the Afro-American Historical Genealogical Society, formed a New York chapter. So we've been having meetings every Saturday from September through June for the last, how many years is it? 30, 35 years, 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way of keeping my interest up because I'm helping other people. We're all learning together about new techniques, new tools, new resources. Mm-hmm. National conference every year. We go to that to see what people all around the country are doing. And well, the chapters all over the country too. So we get in touch with people who are in the areas where some people are doing research. Unfortunately, our chapter in New York City is the only chapter in New York State.
I know that.
I link with people upstate through the African American Historical Society of the Niagara Frontier. And then my cousins send me stuff, I send them stuff, and we're online all the time.
You're never too far from home, apparently.
Right.
How has DNA research come into play with a lot of
it was fantastic. I was so glad when it became available. First, it was with Rick Kittles and Tracing Your African Roots, and then Ancestry and 23andMe, and all came along for different purposes. But I primarily used Ancestry, and what it did was, after I took the DNA test, we started getting DNA matches with other people who, because of the DNA, know they're related to me. And so they're contacting me, I'm contacting them. We're creating all kinds of networks of people. A lot of them I knew because I had done so much with the family. Others are new people I didn't know existed. One of the things that's happening now is a lot of people who are related to me, whose family have gone across to the Caucasian side, are discovering that their great-great-grandmother was my great-great-grandmother's sister. And lo and behold, the DNA says it's there. If they follow the census record, it's there. And they're reaching out in a way their ancestors would have been horrified about.
Right.
Thinking about this notion of confirmation, the work you've been doing all over the years and how DNA has confirmed some of those things, but also, like you said, surprised you with relatives you didn't know you had.
Right. One of the documents in the family was the minutes of the family reunion of one of the lines from Scioto, New York. The beginning of the line was John Peterson. He was Black. His wife, Charlotte, was white. Their family would have a reunion every year from the 1870s or 80s, I think, till the 1930s. I don't know how I came into possession of these minutes. Me, I photocopied them, I digitized them, and now when people are contacting me and they say they're descended from like Edmund Fox from such and such a town in northern Pennsylvania, I can flip through those minutes and see who she was, how she was related to John Peterson and Charlotte Peterson. And they've been white for generations, they thought.
Wow. I love that. I love that. So are you considered the family genealogist?
Not to that line.
Not to that line, but
to my line, yes.
Yes.
I have 3 cousins, I think, who do a lot of work. One of my, maybe I should, I won't use her name. One of my cousins lives in Olean, New York, and she used to work in the Social Security industry.
Oh, wow.
Like all rules and regulations.
Awesome.
She was able to provide me with lots of information and connections. And every time someone dies, she calls me even now to say so-and-so died. It gives me their whole connection to the family.
That is really, like, you just landed in a space where you're able to get all this information and your interest at, and reemphasizing what I just said earlier about being in the right place at the right time, and also having that thirst and discovering all this work. You also talked about, when on the phone, we talked about the oral histories, the stories passed down. And so how were you able to record some of those stories, or how did you record some of those stories?
When we first started with my Aunt Flip in 1979, as we were initially going around getting information, we did some recordings with family members.
Okay.
She would tell me things that she had heard from her mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, because she was alive when her grandmother. There were a lot of rumors. People like to give you bits and pieces, but they wouldn't follow up. And so I had to try to find things in newspapers that matched when people died, murders and some accidents and things like that. His paper, there's another database, Fulton Search. From the
Could you say it again?
Fulton Search.
Fulton Search.
Post office. He has digitized hundreds of thousands of newspapers, primarily from New York State, going back years and years and years. Sometimes they index, sometimes, they can do a keyword search. So I can throw in Peterson and colored.
Okay.
And I can get articles on my family from Wellsville, Olean, Friendship, Prattsburgh, going back to as far back as his database goes.
Is it a subscription database?
No, it's free. You're familiar with it, aren't you, Miranda?
Yes.
Okay.
So as the sort of as the family historian, you've been collecting all these materials, since you first got that first scrapbook. And as an archivist, how have you been archiving all of these documents and all of the research that you've done over the years?
I've been depositing materials at the Allegheny County Historical Society. Their website, and put it in African American, you get a list of things I've been donating over. There are things, as I said with my cousins, anyone who has the email, I send stuff to.
Okay.
We published a book, the genealogy group published a book, Family Legacies, in which I describe my great-great-grandmother, copies of some of the clippings and photographs of her. I've written some articles for some, not genealogical journals, but for genealogy groups. I had a panic attack last week when this COVID virus thing first came up. I thought, if something happens to me, no one knows what all this stuff in my house is.
Wow.
I've told people it's there, but if something happens to me, they just come in. How are they going to know what's important and what's trash? So I'm trying to figure out now what more I need to do. I have a will that says that one of my nephews takes over everything, and he has a vague idea of what's here, but I think I need to document more about what's to happen. It's outside of the range of the Schomburg, and not primary resources, Western New York. I considered the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society. They have a Black research center in Buffalo, but it's primarily modern. I haven't really worked out what to do with the materials I've collected, other than the Allegheny County Historical Society.
Thinking about other repositories that might be an interest beyond just your family, but to other people in the region. Sounds like a start. I know he can probably speak to this a little bit too, because he's been spending a lot of time getting his archives in order and just thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, just like you said, like what is important? So when someone does see, you know, like the archives that we keep, our documents, to see like what should be kept.
Who were you talking about?
Stephen is.
Oh, yes, he's been bugging me about my personal papers.
Yeah, Stan and I have some future conversations on various topics in the future, one being about his own archive, as well as just what you brought up. You know, how do you identify things in the house so that people know what they are, you know? And also, you know, what can be, you know, because you've done all this work over the last 50 years, you know, more, to build this amazing set of materials that are in different repositories and in people's houses because of you, because you knew them and you sent them, this relates to your family line. And so, yes, we should talk about the future disposition of these things, your ideas for it.
I said, I'm concerned about sending things upstate because I can't go back up and use them. I can send copies or I can keep copies, but that's
right.
Everything I've given to the Allegheny County Historical Society is a copy of what I have here.
I actually have a stash of record cartons that I'd be willing to donate to the Stanton Biddle Archive Foundation. And some photos. They are acid free, I believe, but they're not the kind that we used to work with at the Schomburg. They're actually enclosed ones that are really good for photographs or things that you feel like might fall out or whatnot. But I have some of those with your name on it, Stanton.
I'd like to close with a comment. When you get involved in family history research, you have to be prepared for lots and lots of surprises.
Yes.
One of the things that got me started was my connection to my great-great-grandmother. I attended her 100th birthday celebration. My name is in the paper.
Right.
About 5 years ago, when I was looking at DNA matches, I realized that a family rumor that had been going around about who's a parent to whom in the family, I got matches I shouldn't have gotten, and I didn't get matches I should have gotten. Luckily, because this family was so intertwined, I'm still related to all the people I was related to before, but the relationships are different. What I found out was that my mother's father, if we knew was a father, was not my biological grandfather. My biological grandfather was the next door neighbor.
Uh-oh.
Luckily, his children, one of his children married my mother's brother, and another one of his children married my father's sister. So the person who was the grandfather to all of my cousins, I found out was also the grandfather to me and my sisters.
Whew. Be prepared.
Yeah, be prepared. And I had to figure out how to share this information first with my sisters. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. You just happen to discover it.
You're just the messenger.
Yeah. Fortunately, my mother had died by then, so we didn't have to break her heart by saying that her father wasn't her father. So when I get DNA matches now, I have two family trees. One legal, this is what the records say, and the other biological, this is what the DNA says.
Wow. Well, thank you, Stanton. We really appreciate you coming on the show today. It's been a wonderful conversation. We might have to have you back.
Fine with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing a lot of your experiences doing this work over the past, few decades. It's really great to hear from your perspective.
Very inspiring. Very inspiring. And
back to the librarian training. One of the ways I was able to pull all this information together was because of cataloging classes, sorting, classifying, organizing information, and presenting in a format that people can understand.